Hello friendly gamers and Happy New Year! It's been a little bit of a while since I put new content out on the channel, and that's partly being down to work commitments and the Christmas break and being generally quite busy playing games and catching up with friends and family. But I've also had a few bouts of flu, so things are a little bit delayed, but I am busily tinkering away in the background working on the editing for a painting guide for Star Wars Rebellion's expansion Rise of the Empire by Fantasy Flight Games. And Jake and I are also planning a double-header special feature on Richard Breese's games Keyflower and Keyper. And that's the purpose of today's quick video, to do an unboxing of Keyper. This is the retail copy, which has just arrived today in the post. I have played the game already with Jake, played his copy. He backed it on Kickstarter. I didn't. I kind of ummed and ahed over it, but at the time I was going through a bit of a disenchanted phase with Kickstarter, but I'll probably talk about that in a different video. So I waited for the retail copy to finally come out, and I'm delighted to say it's now here. So we're going to take a look at what's inside the box, and I'm going to talk about my first impressions after playing a game with Jake. So let's crack on. So let's just take the cellophane wrapping off. Here we go. So it's got the same size box as Keyflower, Grand Austria Hotel, Orleans, The Voyages of Marco Polo, that sort of size. So first off, we have a load of baggies, and I wish more publishers would be really proactive in providing good quality baggies to store everything in. So it's really nice that Richard Breese continues to provide storage solutions where others don't. And then we have bags and bags and bags of components. So we have the meeples and what looks like the corn tokens as well. Various descriptions, we'll have a look at those in a moment. We have a bag full of plastic gemstones. These are quite nice chunky sculpts actually, which is quite pleasant. I didn't actually get a chance to play with these in the game I played with Jake, because he'd focused very much on the gem strategy and I completely ignored it. So in here we have resource cubes for both the unrefined and then processed materials. You can see the wood tokens there, stone, and the clay as well. Then we have the nice chunky high quality meeples that we associate with games like Carcassonne, but also Keyflower, although I think Richard calls his Keeples in line with the naming conventions of the game. And we have of course some more baggies. Where would we be without these? And perhaps the standout and focal point for the game are these boards, which apparently from what I've read were based on some marketing gimmick that Richard saw when he was at some trade show, and he had this idea that they could be turned into a game board. And you can see that they fold in a variety of ways to reflect the different seasons, and they like so, and you can configure them in different ways to try and bring out different resources according to the time of the year. So if you look on them, they've all got this keep, which is where the name comes from for Keyper. And you can claim these country boards by placing your Keyper on this little tile, and then anything that's placed on there during the course of a game round becomes yours. So it has some design DNA in common with Keyflower, where you'd have your own village, and if anyone placed their keeples on it, you'd get to claim those keeples at the end of the round and have them available to you in the subsequent seasons. So there are some similar design DNA at work in the game. The idea of these is that according to the season, you can see the summer one there, I think the summer or spring. And according to the player numbers, which are indicated on the corners of the boards, if you look very carefully, that tells you which side you have to have facing out at any given time during the seasons of the game. With some of the more difficult to get hold of resources, things like the gemstones here and these specialist mining quarries coming out towards later phases of the game. So you have to build your engine towards maximising those. And you've also got a space for ships to dock. And there are still ships in the game, although unlike Keyflower where they deliver supplies of keeples in the game, you start with a a determined supply of them. That can change according to how you place them out on the different country boards. But in Keyper, the idea is that the boats coming in are there for trading resources, and that's one of the key ways in which you can score points during each of the seasons. So you're not just scrambling for end game victory points, you're trying to build a steady supply of those points during the game. Now, unlike Keyflower, there are only enough boards for 4 players in total. There they are. So it's not quite as convenient if you're playing in large gaming groups. But saying that, I think it's probably a game which I probably tend to be playing with families and smaller groups anyway, so it's not really an issue for me. There's another nice supply bag for tile. And once again, we get the manual supplied in different languages, German and English. It's a hefty manual size, this one, so I'm going to be reading through this later on, trying to get my head properly around the game. When I played it last, Jake taught it very well, but my memory is not the best, so I'm going to have to read through it myself. Here we have the player boards, and you can see you have the scoring track at the top for keeping track of your trade during the course of the game. There's an area here where you put out your keepers for each part of the season. There is a separate keep which you have where you keep your leftover workers, because you can only have a set number, I think it's 8 in each round of the game. So you have to kind of decide which ones you're going to use in the course of a season and which ones you're going to kind of put out to a semi-retirement or a holiday. And then you've got these different sections of the board. We have the kind of the farmland. We have also the kind of the village space where you'll build the village tiles. And there's also space there for the different fairs, which will allow you to score bonus points during each season of the game. And then you've got a storage area on the side of the player boards where you keep your resources during the course of the game. And on the back, we've got some really, really beautiful artwork, which I believe they've changed now. It says on the board actually, Vicky Dalton's taken over the kind of the artwork duties from Richard's sister Jo Breese, but that to me looks very, very similar to the artwork in the earlier Keyflower. So it's really nice that they've managed to keep a consistency in the art style across all the games. That's one of the more attractive aspects of the game, this kind of watercolour idyll that they managed to put out. And we've also got different colours for the scoring tracks of the board according to the player colours. So we've got the red players board and green and blue, and these are nice. You can just about see really good chunky cardstock, really, really nice. So that's really, really quite delightful. And then we've got punch boards. Oh Lord, quite a lot of punch boards. So we have some of the different buildings in the game. So we've got things like an emporium, the entertainer, a farmer, farmer's cottage, a hunter's lodge, that do different things when they're activated by placing a keeper on them during the course of a season. And they've also got little symbols on there which indicate whether these buildings are upgradable or not. So I'm quite looking forward to punching these out. Just want to see how easy these are to punch. And look at that, comes out without barely any effort at all. The games are incredibly well made. Huch and R&D Games do a really good job putting out really high quality components. It's a real delight actually to unbox one of their games because it all comes out beautifully. There's no need to kind of repair things or patch up any kind of torn tiles. They come out without even needing to go and get a craft knife to kind of remove them from the board. So we've got more buildings and farm tiles there. And this goes on for quite some time. There we are, there's some more. Got the barn. And, here we go. So I was talking earlier about the fact that there are ships returning in the game, and here they are. So we've got a nice little touch there. We've got the Keyflower, so that's kind of been, some of these names have returned. We've got the Sea Bastion, so there's continuity even in the naming of the ship vessels that come out in the game, which is a really nice touch. And there we have the keeps that I was referring to. So the game has kind of a representation, 3 representations really, of your player keep. You have the place on the player board, you can just about see it there in the corner, where your people reside, and then this is a representation of the keep as well. So they're not separate places, they're designed to be, if you like, a general representation of the same building. So even on the country boards, these keeps kind of generally represent that same place. So when you're claiming your country tile, you imagine that your castle is actually on that tile in that place, and that this village is somewhere on that kind of country or that island, depending on how you want to look at it. There's a bit of an abstraction at work there, but you can go with it. And then we have the fair. So these are nice, beautiful little tent tiles which come out according to different seasons, which challenge you to meet different objectives. So we have, for example, this one, if we manage to acquire sheep, and I think that's stone, then you can get 2 points, and so on. So the idea is you're kind of using these to kind of build your strategy and work out what you're going to do in the game. So all in all, a huge amount of content, and it might just be my initial perceptions, but it seems to me that there's a lot more game in the box here than there was in the original Keyflower without its expansion. So that is awesome. So that is Keyper, designed by Richard Breese and published by Huch, Gamesalute and R&D Games. And I have to say, I'm really delighted with the production quality on this one too. Just as its predecessor Keyflower was well made, Keyper seems to be maintaining that pedigree and, if anything, improving on it with these rather impressive country boards, which, you know, look to be an intricate and, dare I say it, almost impossible task to pull off. But I have to say, Richard Breese has done it. They're incredible. I have seen a few people commenting on Board Game Geek that they've had difficulties opening these boards, something to do with the perforations on them and the way they've been joined together, perhaps not opening as easily as they might. But I must say I've not really had any issues at all with mine. In fact, on the thread, Jake has already commented on how he managed to open his and demonstrates the kind of the process using one hand, no less, filming, I presume, on his camera phone. So he manages to find where the fold lines are and gives it a very gentle kind of tease with one hand and sees if they can just pop them open. Oh, there we go. That's one. Let's see if we can do the same with this one. So this one, you can see this little raised area in between. All I've got to do is just apply a little bit of pressure and that should just pop open. There we go. And that's it. They're now open and able to kind of deploy to different sides with absolutely no fuss at all. That is really quite an incredible feat of design. So really, really impressive, really fun. And I'm looking forward to exploring some of the nuances of how these different sides kind of play out during the course of the game and different strategies we might want to try out. When I first played Keyper, it was a 4-player game with Jake, Luke and Danny, our other GFG members that you'll see from time to time on the channel. And I was really, I guess, frustrated by my first experience of it because I came in 3rd place, and a large part of that was because I had perhaps misunderstood some of the subtleties around the idea of laying down the keepers. So what happens is, first of all, you place a keeper on the tile, and then once you've got rid of all of your keepers and you've claimed one of the country boards, you can start taking what are called lay down actions, where you lie the keeper down on its side and you get essentially to take the action again. And there are different ways to get rid of your keepers more efficiently. So when someone else takes an action, you have the ability to join them, and that increases the amount of resources they get, but you also essentially get a bonus action and bonus resources that you can then invest into your engine. And so I kind of focused quite aggressively on trimming down my workforce, as it were, to extract a very focused kind of amount of turns around my little farm engine, which was focused about animals and transporting them and then getting them out and making points that way. And I thought I'd done a really good job of it. And it wasn't until the very final phase of the game that I realised just how dreadfully I was doing. Meanwhile, Luke, who sat next to me, has a mountain of keepers, which seems to go against the spirit of this idea of making a very lean workforce. And yet he seems to be able to buy pretty much everything he wants and run away with the game. So I'm really not sure what happened, but I am fascinated by the game. And this is often the case with my experience of Richard Breese's games, and admittedly I've only played a handful of them because they are notoriously difficult to get. I think the very first Key game was Keyword in 1995, and then there was Keydom in 98, which some people argue is the very first worker placement game, although I think there's a game called Bus which might also have a claim to that crown. I don't really want to get into that heated debate. If you're interested in that, go and follow those related threads on Board Game Geek. But there have been a whole load of key games which all share a kind of central DNA, and there seems to be something about that sort of central DNA that really kind of plays to my interests. And I guess maybe some of it's just the adorable artwork, the kind of the anime pulls in Keyper, and just this idea of building a village or building a little engine based around those elements. It kind of makes me feel things like I'm playing SimCity again, or Civilization back on the PC when I was much younger. And I'm talking about the really early editions of those games. And okay, they're focused on cities and bigger civilizations, but there is something inherently satisfying about building a village or a town or a city or a civilization, watching it grow and watching that little engine deliver and kind of develop and watching it spread out in front of you. And I think there is something about that design DNA in both Keyflower and Keyper that really appeals to me and really speaks to me, even though perhaps these are games that are better suited to people with skills in things like maths and computer programming and this kind of very scientific mindset, where you can kind of calculate very quickly probabilities and optimizations and things that you can do to really trim down and streamline your strategy. And I'm not very good at those things, unfortunately, and yet I still find the game is inherently satisfying and fascinating, and I'm sure that my experience of Keyper will be no different. So I don't want to say too much more than that, I guess, at this stage, because I really want to kind of delve into this in a lot more detail once Jake and I and the other members of GFG have had a chance to play the game. And so we want to unpick what it is about them, what it is about that design DNA that Richard Breese has carried through these games that is so inherently appealing to us. And then hopefully try and kind of get the game out there to a wider audience. It's still a little bit of a niche game in my opinion, and that might be just due to the availability and the fact that the print runs seem to be quite sporadic. Although saying that, there has been some good news. I think I read the other day that there's a chance that Key Market might be getting a reprint soon, just ahead of the next game in the Key series, which by the sounds of its description I've read on Board Game Geek seems to be some kind of card game, a card drafting game with similar kind of overtones to things like Seven Wonders. So I'm intrigued by that one and looking forward to seeing what Richard Breese has in store in the next kind of development in the series. So on that note, I will leave you there. If you are interested in finding out more about the upcoming special feature doubleheader, call it what you will, then please remember to like and subscribe and click on that update notification button so that you stay tuned about future GFG content. But for now, thank you very much for watching, and I shall say goodbye. Take care.